A lot to discuss, a lot of questions. Aurel Braun is a professor of international relations and political science at the University of Toronto. He joins me live from Toronto. Professor, do you believe the summit will produce anything of substance? And can the two sides make any type of progress? What, in your opinion, is the realistic outcome here?
Well, we have to think of this as a kind of multidimensional approach and put ourselves in the frame of Mr. Trump's mind. And I think if we do that, the circumstantial evidence suggests that this is not about necessarily gaining something that is enormous in terms of a substantive breakthrough, but that rather that this works at the personal and political level and also at the policy level. So let me just start first by saying at the personal and the political level. Mr. Trump has been repeatedly stating that the Russian investigation under Special Counsel Mueller is something that is a witch hunt, that it has no substance, there was no collusion. So the message, in a sense, that he's sending is that this investigation is not inhibiting him personally and that it is not impairing his presidency. Now, at the policy level, he is, the American president, in a very major trade war with the European countries, and is also pressuring the other members of NATO to spend more on defense, that they should meet the 2% goal. It is noteworthy that the summit on the 16th is to be 4 days after the NATO summit in Brussels. There are fears that the Europeans have at that summit that the pressure that Mr. Trump is going to exert on is going to increase. In a sense, by meeting with Mr. Putin on the 16th, Mr. Trump is using that leverage. He is sending a message to the Europeans. He's telling them, I can get around you. Well, I want a paradigm shift.
Well, let me go back to what the President Trump tweeted today, and our correspondent Nathan King also brought it up. And I'm going to read out his tweet, portion of it again to you. He says, Russia continues to say they had nothing with meddling in our election. Once again, appearing to take Russia at its word. If you're NATO, if you're EU, how is this playing out with what Trump is saying? And are they saying basically Trump is shifting from its traditional allies and cozying up to Moscow?
This is one worry that they have, but there is a kind of scheme to this in a way. Because the United States, at the same time that it is making these kind of statements, has tremendously increased its military power. It has been sending forces to cooperate with the Baltic states, with Poland. So on the ground, the United States is taking a pretty hard line. But what Mr. Trump has been telling the Europeans, and what Mr. Bolton has been saying for quite some time now, is that the era that, in the view of the Americans, where the United States pays for the protection of the Europeans, while the European states make profits, that era is over. They have to meet their defense commitments, and they also have to make concessions on trade. Now, John Bolton is a hardliner on Russia.
Before you go on to Bolton, because we're running out of time, he was considered a hawk. In fact, on Russian meddling, he called it a true act of war against the United States. What happened?
I doubt that he has changed his view. In a recent interview, he said that the matter of Russian interference in elections will be brought up, that he personally, when he visited Mr. Putin, brought this up himself. He has pushed consistently for an increase in American military strength. So we have to look at a distinction between this rhetoric, which Mr. Putin is using, I suspect in part to scare and to leverage the Europeans, and what is really happening on the ground. So I think it's premature to say that John Bolton has switched from being a hawk to being an appeaser.
All right, we'll leave it there. Aurel Braun, thank you so much.